Please be seated. The title of the sermon is Distractions. What distracts us from paying attention to the true word? The reading by Paul, think about this. I mean, we just had Christmas. You just opened up a number of presents, some of which you love and some of which you wish you weren't given. Some of which you're probably returning. But nonetheless, you have presents. Well, here's a present that will never rust or fade. Namely, that you are called to be children of God, adopted sons of God. When Jesus became man on Christmas Day, the Holy Spirit that dwells inside of Jesus and in the Trinity flowed within humanity from its very beginning to its very end. That is what made us sons, the presence of God within you. That is what enables you to go from this life to the next, even after you die. Wow, I mean, what a present. And yet, it means almost nothing to the majority of people. Why? Because, well, heaven, eternity, yeah, I guess. Can't see it. There's a lot of people who don't really believe in it. There are some people who, even though they do believe in it, don't do anything to worship. They're not here. And so only a small number of people, called the remnant, really listen. You are the remnant. Now, reading from Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a prophet. He lived from, or prophesied, I should say, from 626 to 587 BC, a 39-year period in the southern kingdom of Judea. And he, of course, noticed that the northern kingdom of Israel had been conquered by the Assyrians, who then deported all kinds of people into their kingdom. And what he is saying in this reading, which is meant really for the people of Judea, is, wake up, or what happened to them could happen to you. Hopefully someday, the people who are in exile in Assyria will come back. This remnant, those who remain of those who were killed, will come back. There won't be a lot of people, but those people will have been humbled by having lost their kingdom because they had lost their faith. Well, people don't listen to Jeremiah. Again, because the lure of the physical is so strong. I mean, you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can smell it. And therefore, the spiritual just seems like so abstract, so maybe not even there, that people just turn to what they can see and touch, not to what they can feel and think. Well, we go into the gospel reading, and here you have the quintessential example, Herod the Great. Dana preached on this flight into Egypt and the murder of the holy innocents last Saturday. Let me give you some background to understand it even better. Herod the Great, his father was Antipater, who was Jewish, and he had been made procurator of Judea by Caesar. Sort of the same role that Pontius Pilate would one day have. And he appointed his son, when Herod was only 25, to a role of authority in his kingdom. However, when Antipater died, Herod had a hard time. And he had a hard time basically because you sort of had to keep following politically what was going on. At first, he was smart. He aligned himself with Julius Caesar. But then, when Julius Caesar was assassinated by Cassius, he aligned himself with him. But then when Cassius was then conquered and killed by Mark Antony in Philippi, the fox, Herod the Great, basically switched his allegiance from Cassius to Mark Antony. But then Mark Antony wasn't paying much attention to Judea because he was paying more attention to Cleopatra. And the Parthians came in and conquered Judea. And Herod had to flee, first to Arabia, and then eventually to Rome. There, Mark Antony apologized that he hadn't been paying much attention to Judea, and gave Herod some Roman forces to take with him back to Judea. And they conquered the Parthians, and their king was removed. And they made Herod king of the Jews in the year 37 BC. Now, the people didn't really view him very well as king of the Jews because of the fact that he was only half Jewish, while Antipater was Jewish, his father. His mother, Cyprus, was an Arabian princess. And so, you're only one, not even full Jewish. And two, Antipater was not in the lineage of King David. And so, how could this person really be respected if he wasn't in the lineage of the King of Kings, David? So the people were not happy with Herod. They kind of wished they could have somebody else. Herod, sensing this, became very paranoid as to maybe somebody's going to try to get rid of me. At first, he tried to please the people. For example, he built the temple of Herod the Great, a temple it took 83 years to complete. It was begun in the year 19 BC and completed in the year 63 AD. Most of it was in the first 10 years. There were 10,000 workmen building this temple over a 10-year period. He'd even trained 1,000 priests that could only work on this part, the sanctuary. Others could work on the rest, but only priests who were artisans could work on building the sanctuary. It was seen as one of the wonders of that age. But he also built a couple of palaces for himself. One was Herodium, which was south of Bethlehem. And one you probably have heard of called Masada, which was on the eastern shore of the Dead Sea. These were lush places where he took very good care of himself. He also built a port city called Caesarea, naming it after Caesar. And this was an artificial harbor that he created. There was a wall that was 200 feet wide, standing in 20 fathoms of water, meaning that there were 120 feet down in the water, which is a good feat today, let alone back then. Still, the people, they sort of saw Caesarea as really for the Romans and the Gentiles, not the Jews. And that he was spending more time and more money on his own palaces than he was on the temple. So there was still a fair amount of anger at Herod the Great. And his own family sensed that and wanted to rebel against him and replace him. And so Herod, during his reign, put to death his mother-in-law, his wife, Meramri. He put to death one of his sons, Joseph, and he put to death 2 of his own children, Alexander and Aristobulus. So, while the murder of the innocents is not in any history book other than the Bible, it is pretty reasonable that that occurred. The Magi had come from a distance, following a star that led them to Judea, but they didn't know exactly where in Judea this king would be born. So here they come in now to Herod the Great, who's like Mr. Paranoid personified, and say, hi, we're from many lands. We've come to worship now the newborn king of the Jews. And he's like, well, who do you think I am? But Herod is kind of sly. So Herod says, I'm not sure exactly where this is happening. And he calls in his chief priests and a few scholars, and they find the prophecy of Micah, namely that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. And so Herod says, now you go, the 3 of you, and worship him in Bethlehem. And then come back and tell me, because the exact location, because I want to go and worship him too. Well, he didn't want to worship him too. He wanted to kill him. And when the 3 Magi decided, that they really knew what Herod was about, and so they did not go back to Jerusalem, they went back to their country. Herod, discovering this, was furious. But now he knew that the kid was born in Bethlehem, but which kid? And so the only way he could sort of remain safe in his mind is to put every child from 2 years of age under to death. Imagine, those of us who are parents, and having a child ripped from your arms, a baby ripped from your arms, and stabbed to death with a sword. Unbelievable amount of suffering. Joseph, being warned in a dream, takes the baby and the mother to Egypt. A journey of 151 miles. He went from Bethlehem to Gaza, from Gaza down into basically the first city you come to in Egypt, Pelusium. And interestingly, after the Babylonian captivity, a number of Jews fled to Egypt. And so in many of the cities of Egypt then, there was a Jewish population. So it wasn't like he was going out in the middle of nowhere. He was going to places where there were other Jews, where he would feel comfortable as well as safe. And there he stayed until Herod died. Now, when Herod died, he decided, because again, he didn't really care too much for his children, to divide his country into 3 parts. So no one got the full power. The one that's mentioned in the Gospel, Archelaus, was given control of the area around Jerusalem, Judea. Archelaus, he learned so well from his father, that the first thing he did when he became the ruler of that area was to kill 3,000 people who he thought might want to overthrow him. 3,000 people. He was so evil that within 2 years, Rome removed him as the king. But you can understand, while Joseph did not want to come back and settle anywhere in Judea, he wanted to continue going north and into the area of Galilee, which is controlled by another of the sons called Herod Antipas. And there he settled in the most obscure village that he had lived in anyway, called Nazareth. It is so obscure, it's not even mentioned in the Old Testament. And there, in relative secrecy, he then lived and brought up Jesus. Now, the point here is that Herod did everything in his power to maintain his power. What did he prize? Certainly not spirituality. He built a temple simply to sort of trick the people into thinking he was a good guy. But he was really not a good guy. to the point that he murdered many people in his own family. And okay, so he maintains power from 37 BC until 4 BC, 33 years, and then dies. What did he gain from that? Hell. You know, his choices basically determined where he would be in the afterlife, and it wasn't heaven. So what did he really profit from? Nothing. You know, he was penny wise and pound foolish. He saw that which was, glittering, gold and beautiful palaces. But what did he really inherit? Hell. Think of Jesus in contrast. Where does God wish his son to be born? Not in a palace, not even in a home in Nazareth, but in a manger, a farm stall. Where does he want his son to live? In a palace as a prince? No, in an obscure town as a carpenter. Does he want his son to ride in a golden chariot? No, he walks. Does he want his son to become a military leader who will overthrow Rome? No, he wants his son to ride into Jerusalem on a donkey to proclaim peace and to be crucified. Why? Because he wants the people to know that God came for everyone, not just for the rich, but also for the most abject of the poor, for everyone. Did the people understand that? Not really. The Jews had a horrible time. It's like, well, we want a king riding into Jerusalem on a horse to proclaim war against Rome, not this carpenter guy. Okay, so he performs miracles, but he's not that impressive. Where's the gold? Where's again, the distractions are there. Okay, so here we advance to today. We may think, oh, we're much better than those people. And yet, if you think about it, we are also sometimes given in to these distractions. I think of corporate America, where some people will do anything to get to the top. They will cheat, they'll steal, anything. And what do people brag about? You've probably seen this in your own life. Their home. Christmas time being one, well, come we're having this massive party in your house. Come into the house. So you can sort of say, geez, I wish I lived there. But no, I live in this dump over here. But I've been invited into this wonderful house so that I can say, wish I was you. But somebody doing that is doing that sometimes just because they feel insecure, and therefore they have to show you how important they are by where they live, how rich their house may be, by kind of car they drive, the vacations they take. Even the shallowness of people with regards to relationships. I remember in Princeton having a guy once come in to see me for counseling. His wife was very ill with cancer and was dying. And he was divorcing her so he could marry a younger woman. And he said, I didn't sign up for this. And I said, I think you did. In sickness and in health, till death do depart. Well, he ignored me and divorced his wife and went on and married this younger woman. And at the same time, I was going through a process with my first wife who was dying, sick for 21 years before she died. And most people, like this guy I counseled, would have wanted to escape that kind of a reality rather than go through a living hell with someone as they're dying. And yet, I grew through that process. I began to really see with 20/20 vision, in 2020, how important it is, our spiritual growth, what true happiness was. And so the person who divorced his wife for the younger woman lost that opportunity. The illness of his wife and death produced him to shrink as a person because of the choices he made. So we're all in the midst of these distractions. Yet, think for a minute. What is truly important? What is going to last? As I've said in humor, your Lexus is not going to fit into the coffin with you, but your soul will. Therefore, what are you spending more time on? I love the saying in Scripture, what does it profit a man to gain the world but lose his soul? The answer? Nothing.
Amen. Amen.